Okay, so this video is going to be about how to make a summary and response essay. There's a lot of different approaches out there. This is just my approach, and it seems to work for me. And first off, you start by finding an article and reading it. So I found this article, What an Unemployed Millennial Learned at Summer Camp, and so I read that article. So that's the first thing you do. And then what I like to do, just to make sure that you're safe from accidentally plagiarizing or forgetting a references list or whatever, as soon as you start to work with a source, I would make your references list. So we look over here, this is the format for references. So it's author's last name, first initial. This is for a newspaper article. And then year, comma, month, day in parentheses, title of article, title of newspaper, retrieved from, and then the link. So we'll take this and I'll go and open this to the side, and let's see, so copied that. Oh, no. So copy that. That's the title. And then here's the author's name. Delete the first name, comma, first initial, and then do year. That. And so we got the title, then we have the newspaper. Retrieved from. And you can copy this link up here, but as you'll notice, there's lots of, this is really long and it's got these other like references and stuff in it. What I would do is go search around for anything that says permalink or stable link or something like that. So I'm going to copy this one and put that at the end. So now we want to remove all the formatting so that it goes to the way that we want. Then we can format it however we want. And we want to italicize that part there. And now we've got a references list. So we can call it references. We want that to be centered, but we don't want the rest of it to be centered. Doesn't want to do that separately. Okay. There. So there had to be a line after it for some reason. Then we want the bottom to be a hanging indent. So there's 3 parts of this. You want to grab the middle one, move it over. And I don't know why it's there. I don't know why it was doing that. But anyway, so now you want this to be on its own page. So go to that part and go to insert and insert page break. So now this is going to be on the beginning of its own page no matter what, which is a good thing. So that if I add information here, let's just say if you make a page break, if you start entering, notice it's staying there. Nope, where'd it go? It pushed it onto the next page. So that's a way to make sure that this is always on its own page, which is really useful. You might wonder to yourself, did I put a page break in there? Then you go to home, and you click on this button. Oh, there it is. There's a page break. Even though you can't see it, it's invisible. See? Bloop, it's gone. So you start out with an introduction. There's lots of ways to write an introduction. This is one way that I found kind of easy to reproduce in a lot of different situations. So you start with a general statement. Let's see. Many times people can find helpful lessons that come out of unfortunate circumstances. Okay, so you make a general statement, and then after that you want to provide some background information that would transition to a summary of it. So kind of explaining and elaborating on this idea. For example, a person may find himself or herself in a less than ideal situation, such as being unemployed. While this does not seem to be a fruitful scenario, you can still, we don't want to use you, may be possible to find a good lesson in the midst of that situation. So now we make a transition into the summary. So I know good is not a good word. It's not very specific. We'll come back to vocabulary later. That's something you do in the revision. Right now you're just sort of writing without worrying too much about, what's the best word or what the best way to say it is. You just want to get it out. So the first thing we do when we start making a summary is we identify the source. And so you kind of make a transition. So this is what happened to, let's see, Joy. Did I get the name right? Always check if the name is right. I believe it was spelled with an I, and it was. So always check the name, because it looks like a real boneheaded move to mess up the name of an author, because you're able to check it. So okay, this is what happened in Joy Levere, author of the article APA mistake. These should be lowercase. I'm going to lowercase them. Okay. I should lowercase that too. Okay. In the article, she describes, now, so just some things to point out here is that here it's very clear that the information that I'm about to share is from an article, because it's clearly laid out here that there's a transition from what was being talked about previously to now the author, and now we're talking about the article. So this is a way that you avoid plagiarism, is you always make sure that it's clear it's coming from the article. So in the article, she describes her, describes herself dealing with her own unemployment and the resulting lessons she learned while working as a camp counselor at a girls' summer camp. Okay. Let's see. While they're at the summer, or while they're at the camp, she found many of the young girls. At this point, you might be wondering, like, well, how old are they? Because girls can cover quite a range. So I would go and find back in the article how old they are, because that could be an important detail. At least it gives the readers a clear idea of like what kind of girl she's working with. Because they're actually saying young women. Young women, 12 to 16. Okay, so age 12 to 16. Actually, you should probably spell those out. Newspapers sometimes don't spell out numbers. 12 to 16. She found many of the young girls aged 12 to 16 were under incredible amounts of stress from what somewhat inconsequential issues. However, despite her feelings, she listened intently without judging them and tried to give them good and sound advice. In the process of this, she found that she could see herself in the young women she was advising. And in many ways, she began to practice what she was suggesting, i.e., that's a quote from the article. Let's see. Now I think that's pretty good for a summary. At this point, that captures the most of it. So now, as opposed to excessive worry over personal failures and future plans. Okay, so now that you've got a summary, now you want to transition into your thesis statement, but you don't want to just cut to your thesis statement. You want to make a transition, and what I like to call this is the trigger statement, where you describe what triggered your response. So now in this case, I've already thought about the article a little bit, so it's kind of this isn't just happening like off the cuff, but I mean I've kind of thought about it a little bit as I've been writing these things. So you say, as I was reading her article, I found myself pondering the nature of helping others and the personal benefits stand to gain from lending others a hand. In many ways, we might be too focused on the receiver of help to recognize that the person doing the helping also stands to benefit a great deal. So then we make a thesis statement. This kind of sounds like a thesis statement, but and maybe this is me like being in the 5-paragraph essay rut, that whenever I write shorter essays, I get in the rut of thinking about them in terms of like, well, I need 3 main points. You don't always have to have 3 main points. Lots of different ways you can do it. But then you want to make a thesis statement. So after reflecting on my own life, after reading and reflecting on my own life, I believe that helping others can open our eyes to our own need for help and care. Okay, so that would be the thesis statement. So then I'm going to try and prove this statement by giving out examples. So start with the topic sentence. So and the topic sentence should connect in some way to this. There should be a transition. So the first I want to say the first thing I thought of. Well, we'll just go with that. The first thing I thought of was when giving advice to others, I benefit because it solidifies my own thinking about myself. Many times I might have conflicting attitudes or beliefs that become clearer as I talk to someone else. Then so you generally, I think, you have a topic sentence, then you have a claim that you make, and then you have an example of that claim in reality. So for example, just as Louvier found herself giving advice to the young women. Their own hypocritical worries and stress. You know what? I'm just going to delete this part. Example, Louvier found herself giving advice to young women and then coming to terms with her own hypocritical worries and stress. So it solidified in her mind the need for not worrying, or the need for I've had this same experience. So right here, give an example, and then you're connecting with that example. Or you can do it the other way too. You could share your example and then say how it's connected to the article. but you put them next to each other so that it's really clear. I've had the same experience. This is like a transition sentence, and now I'm going to one time I found a friend herself sharply calling herself ugly. I began to contradict her and tell her I wish that she would not say such things, insulting things about herself. Even though it did not seem to stop her, from being so insulting, it's solidified in my mind the need to avoid harsh criticisms of myself. At times I've judged my failures very harshly, and I'm going to have to come up with more words for this. Judge my failures very harshly, but something about seeing someone else doing the same thing gave me the chance to see how fruitless it is to say hurtful things about oneself. After that conversation, when I found myself being a tough self-critic, my own words came to my mind, which was very affirming. Therefore, best benefits reaching out to help encourage others is that it has a way of encouraging us as well. So that'd be the first paragraph, and there might be more that I can add to it, but at this point I think it's good to move on to another paragraph. So when you move on to another paragraph, you want to have a transition sentence that summarizes the first paragraph, and then have a topic sentence that follows. So you'd say something like, in addition to benefiting by solidifying now at this point in the paper, I'm thinking to myself about the article, and I'm wondering, it seems like I'm coming up with all these I'm trying to come up with all these ideas about how helping other people is a benefit to ourselves. But I'm thinking back to the article and I'm wondering, um, you know, does every does can I distill this into 3 points? This is where I don't like the 5 paragraph essay because I think it kind of forces you to think in like a scavenger hunt way. Like I'm looking at this article thinking, what are other benefits that I have? Because this other idea I have is that here she is. She went to summer camp just to sort of like pass the time so that she wasn't just stuck at home being unemployed. And um, and then she had like this really good experience. So I almost want to maybe talk about that instead of just trying to fit a round peg in a square hole and find another thing. So so I'm gonna say that. Okay, in addition to helping others, giving us better attitudes about ourselves. Um, Also important to recognize the value of serendipity. Okay, so at this point now you're at a crossroads. If you're following with me, because now you've got a point that is very different from the other point, and when we go back to the thesis statement, um, it's going to need to have some adjusting to account for that new kind of idea. So I believe that helping others can open our eyes to our own need for help and care, and that we must be on the lookout for positive outcomes in spite of bad circumstances. And so this is going to have to make me change my whole introduction a little bit, because so far, that's what it says in the beginning, find helpful lessons that come out of unfortunate circumstances. Then a person may find herself. So it's already kind of talked about that idea. So I think it'll be safe to move on. But sometimes you need to make adjustments to your introduction to make sure that it still accounts for and can accommodate that idea. So in addition to helping others, giving us it sounds a little bit awkward with the two INGs. So in addition to how helping others gives us better attitudes about ourselves, it's also important to recognize the value of serendipity. Many of the upsides or many of the upsides or silver linings of a given situation are not not immediately obvious and require us to do some careful observations. Okay, just as she said something in the article. She said, if part of me wanted to dismiss their issues or just tell them to calm down, they will encounter bigger challenges in life. So Right here she says, then I began to notice a different kind of energy. Okay, so she was like working and she was exhausted, and then she began to notice a different kind of energy. Many of the girls could easily be overwhelmed, anxious to the point where they couldn't have fun. And she talked about these kind of things. Working with these girls kind of put things in perspective for me. So, at first, felt so exhausted from the flurry of activities. Flurry of activities and initially felt confused about how she should change this to for instance. Change the vocab there. So Louviere initially felt so exhausted from the flurry of activities and confused about how she should advise the campers about their problems. That she, and then I'm going to just put in a short quotation. Was different from the by paying. Okay, so just as Louviere started to focus on the other issues stressing the girls by paying attention we can find the good even in bad situations. So now, see, I'm writing this as I'm going. So now I'm thinking in my life, where have I found good even in bad situations that I was not happy about? Okay. So in my own life, I remember taking my two sons on a spur of the moment trip to cook food outside at the park. Unfortunately, shortly after the fire got started, and the wind began to blow. I was roasting hot dogs and trying desperately to boil a pot of water for macaroni and cheese. These two foods are their favorites. It was even snowing, and in springtime, because it was springtime. That's an important detail. Unfortunately, shortly after the fire got started, the wind began to blow. I was roasting hot dogs and trying desperately to boil a pot of water for macaroni and cheese when it soon was even snowing, and my boys started complaining about their fingers being cold. I could hear myself criticizing this whole plan. Why didn't I bring gloves? Why did I assume it would be warmer? Had been on the previous days. Why did I think it was a good idea to boil water for macaroni? Italicize them to show that it's like my thoughts or something. Make this positive. Okay. I stopped spending my mental energy on how this was not the most thought out plan. We began brainstorming a way to fix it without the whole operation giving my boys the memory of Dad's bad plan. Finish the macaroni while I was reading catch up. Okay. I could have how bad my idea was, and one of the best outings we've had. Okay, so then you gotta find a way to wrap it up, and so talk more about the topic sentence. So the topic sentence of this one is about by focusing on the good in the particular situation, we are not wasting our time on negative elements. We can find a better way to enjoy our lives. Okay, so then, now we get. I feel like I should have a third point. I wonder about the other things that I've thought of. Those are both related to the same kind of thing. Maybe I could find one more point. Others, I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe I could find another point about how when we help others, it helps solidify the advice we tell ourselves. Go back in the article. Okay, so she talks about rest hour and how she had 45 minutes of complete silence in the middle of the day when campers take to their tents. Okay, so maybe I could talk about this part. So at the beginning of the summer, I used to use that time to brood about my problems and map out dozens of life plans. But as the summer wore on, rest hour became the most peaceful time I could relax and enjoy the best of a New England summer served chill. Okay, so she talks about, okay, so maybe you can talk about this because I really don't like sitting still, but the times that I've done that have been helpful, so I can talk about that. Guess I'll put a pin in that. Maybe I'll talk about rest time. I'm just going to put a pin in that, and I'm going to come back to this, see if there's a better point I could make. Okay. So yeah, I'll probably talk about that. So it's 45 minutes of complete silence in the middle of the day. That sounds terrible to me. I don't like that idea. I like these ideas up here. She's talking about they had no time to do anything else. They were doing bonfires and dusk filled with evening programs, people singing, doing all these like confidence building stuff. Like that just sounds like a lot of fun to me. Building fires and reading maps and doing first aid. You know, you're learning a bunch of stuff, doing a bunch of stuff, and then like you have to wait here. So anyway, so I'll write about that. So here I talked about the value of serendipity. And then also giving advice to others, how that helps you. Now this talks about serendipity. So okay, so another aspect of serendipity that I thought about after reading Louviere's essay was how able to enjoy the summer more when she was forced to be silent each day. Another aspect of serendipity that I thought about. She was able to enjoy the summer more. By nature, I don't like to sit still. And reading that Moliere had to write for 45 minutes made me feel pained. Nevertheless, it reminded me of the times I have sat in quiet and to think about my life or worries or plans in a more positive way. At times, similar to Louviere, I will describe as something that made it think about myself. I use that time to brood about my problems and map out dozens of life plans. Brood about my problems. It sounds really good. I will brood about my problems. Recognize the direction this dark current of thoughts is washing me downriver. I can redirect obsessive. I think she talks about mapping out dozens of life plans, and it's not in a positive context that she talks about that. This may sound more like the obsessive way map out dozens of life plans in a way it can be. Whenever I find myself in a stressful situation, I endless ways I can help my situation. What I can do. Therefore, silence seems horrible to me. But when I've taken the time to enjoy it, I gain a better perspective. Okay, so that's like that's pretty long. Now, I'm going to go on a conclusion. These might not be the best paragraphs. Again, there's no finished paper. There's always just a deadline, and you have to work with what you got. So, then you want a conclusion. So, a conclusion, you should essentially try to summarize all the points that you've made, and then kind of tie it back come back to what you talked about in the introduction. So, in the end, I appreciate has reminded me about the nature of difficulty and our own attitudes. Nature of difficulty and how we have control over our own attitudes and ability to see the good in a given situation. Of course, it isn't easy to do this, and many times stressing out and hammering out plans to fix everything. Looks productive. After all, if I'm worrying, at least I'm doing something, right? Um, and then you try, usually toward the end of the conclusion, you try to broaden it out again to like a wider situation. So, however, that the something usually doesn't lead me anywhere better. I think we would all benefit from methods of trying to see the positive side, being on the lookout for serendipity, all right, so that's just a first draft. I know there's a lot that could be done to improve it, and maybe we'll talk about this paper again when it comes to the revision time. So that's a basics of what I would say to write a summary and response, because you're summarizing the article and then you're trying to share your thoughts on it and what you think and what you've experienced. So there's one thing, this might make a couple of you nervous, but if you notice up here, uh-oh, I did not save it. So yeah, you always want to save it first. I probably should have done that, because then it would be doing auto save. So call it a summary response essay. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be uploading a copy of this for you to look at. And yeah, good luck. Good luck with your essay. Make sure that you double space it, and then put your name at the top. Might even work to have a cover page. Just a simple one. I don't know why they have all these complicated ones. Yeah, I'll just do a blank page. And then, APA cover page is just my name, or the student name, and then I believe it's the university, and then the date. So, and then it should be centered, but we'll double check. So you can go here to sample paper. Oh, the title. Whoops. Title, name, university. So the date is not on there. Oh, I don't have a title for my paper. Titles are something that take a little bit more time, take a little bit more thinking. So I think I'll make another video, because I want to keep this thing under an hour. So anyway, yeah, so it should be title, name, and then university. The date should not be on there. All right, so hopefully that gives you an idea about how to approach this. There's so many different ways that you could respond to an essay. This is just one example, but yeah, I hope that this helps to kind of see the process start to finish. And then revising will be something that we'll do later after we've written it, and we might think of ways to improve it, ways to include more examples. Have a good one.